Lubna Abbas, a skilled glass fume artist, developed her passion for art in early childhood, thanks to her parents, who were both artists and lovers of handcrafts. Growing up in a creative environment, Lubna explored various art forms, eventually discovering glass fume art. Her parents' influence shaped her appreciation for patience and precision, which are vital in working with delicate glass. Today, her pieces reflect both technical mastery and artistic expression. Lubna encourages aspiring artists to experiment and embrace the unpredictability of glass, finding joy in the creative process just as she did.
My passion is living. It's life, and people and ideas. So I think that let's say the passion slash obsession that I have for glassmaking and the act of glassmaking and teaching, I think that the passion found me, it discovered me at a very, very young age. So I come from a family that was always tinkering. My father was a maker, my mother was a maker, a baker, a sewer. And so when we were growing up in the States, we were very active making things. So my mom and dad were canning and pickling, and my mother sewed most of our clothes. And I had a babysitter, and she was originally from Alaska, and she was a native of the land. Her brother was my father's schoolmate, and she used to babysit me, and she taught me how to knit and to make things, and she also introduced me to bead making. And so at a young age, I was very fascinated with beads. And then when I was about 12, when we moved back to Kuwait, we went on an amazing camping trip, and Dad took us to Murano, and I got to see how they were glass blowing and bead making. And that's really where it started. But it kind of developed over stages and different periods of my life. But I was really lucky because I come from a family who really celebrate and have reverence and respect for craft. And craft is super important to us. And it was something that my late father, Saif Abbas, used to say. He'd say, and my dad, had a PhD. He was academic, but he also had other passions. So he loved fishing. He used to tie his own flies. My parents both loved to cook and garden, and he said it was very important for us, for humans, to have other interests for what we call self-development. So he said, no matter what your accolades or your certificates or your shahadat are, you need to have interests that are not necessarily limited to your profession, and that we are more than our profession. And that was something that my dad really instilled in us. And I think that had a lot to do with our house always being like a place where things were happening all the time in different corners of the house. We were always tinkering away, making things, experimenting. And that was the kind of environment that I was able to benefit from tremendously. That's a really insightful query, because, again, as I say, in terms of like, how did I choose it, or on what basis did I select it? I think it was quite organic, because I had tried, I was always trying many different things. So even growing up, my dad was so generous, and he built me a photography studio when I was studying photography at university as well. And so basically what happened is, I've been able to go through different phases and stages work-wise and career-wise. So I had worked in the States, and then when I came back to Kuwait, I don't know if a lot of your viewers know, but I was part of the team that came back after liberation, and I had a 5-year stint at KTV2. And so coming back to Kuwait, the fabric markets and the textiles and then the Friday market and seeing all of the things there, that was something that was always happening. And then I left the public sector. I left KTV2 to go into the petrochemical sector, found out that it wasn't, I mean, I learned so much in that sector. I was doing marketing communications. But I realized that, you know, it wasn't my gig. And then I got involved in real estate, and I was part of the team that launched and opened Souk Sharq back in the day. And then I went in as became an entrepreneur. So becoming an entrepreneur at that point, and then going back into the corporate sector again. Part of my job in the corporate sector was handling the arts business for the company that I worked for. And through that, as I was doing that, I knew that I wanted to do something that was scaling down, working on a smaller, more humane scale, people to people. And so I wanted to do something that enabled people to find their creative voices in various ways. So I did a lot of work in jewelry and beads, and so that was something I was collecting beads, and then we started taking workshops all over the world. And then I decided that I needed to learn how to make my own focal beads to incorporate them in my jewelry. And I took a trip with a friend of mine to England, to one of the most prominent bead makers around, Allah yarhamha. She was the one who was really instrumental. She helped me like how to do the setup, Diana East. And she passed away in 2017. But I was so lucky, we went to her up in Leicester and took a workshop. And that was really where it all started. And then I decided to build a studio, a small private studio in 2005, 2006. And then I was like, I want to share this with anyone who's interested in Kuwait. We don't have to get on a plane to go somewhere to discover our creative voices or to discover or to learn things. And now, you know, all these years later, Kuwait is so rich with so many experiences that people can explore, and it's all accessible. And that was really what was really important. It wasn't only for me to like go into this journey personally, but I always had this vocation to share. And I mean, my dad was a teacher, and he kept on telling me, you should be a teacher. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then, I mean, he's not around anymore. I wonder what he would think if he knew that I was also a really passionate teacher, which is what he was as well. Saif and Zainab and Saif, my parents, they were both really into it. And of course, being in the United States in the 60s, a student, they were on a really tight budget. My dad was a scholarship student. My mom was a teenager when she became my mom. But they were always, you know, wanting to do things. And of course, economizing was a big deal as well. But in those days, so they were canning and pickling, and my mother made our own bread at times. So it was really interesting because like when we left the States, my mother, she came back with all of the makal and like butterick patterns. And I'll never forget the scene where we didn't have all the furniture and like even the curtains weren't up. And it was our first Eid. We had never experienced Eid in Kuwait. And my parents had been up nonstop for 3 days to make our Eid clothes. And I was like, so, you know, like why can't we get clothes from Zahar like my neighbors, whatever you were doing? And my dad was there sitting next to my mom, and he was doing the stitching of the hems, and my mother had the sewing machine, and they were both on pillows on the floor. And for me, I thought that was like the ultimate expression and form of love is when you take time to make things and do things. And I was like, and now most of the clothes that I wear are made by people that I know. I have a good friend of mine, she makes all of my trousers. And it's very hard for me to not feel so appreciative of that aspect. So that the whole idea of that was really important. And so that really had a lot to do with it. My mother was also a maker. She was full-time. I call her the home economist, and she was the dynamo of really all of the things that that we did. And she was the one who was like, "This is what we're going to be doing." And so we did a lot of fishing. We did a lot of camping. My parents were avid gardeners, and they even took like landscaping classes because they wanted to landscape their homes. And so it was a lifestyle that was quite different from a lot of what was happening in Kuwait in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. But it was, you know, it was rich in so many ways. And I was really lucky to have that experience. And I think that's really important, is for us to, you know, yes, we're living with a lot more, you know, there's a lot of, not a lot more, but there's prosperity. But prosperity can also create some form of apathy and laziness. And that's why it's really important for us to get people moving, to get people engaged, to be interactive, and to see the world and to experience their way of expression through the hands and through the act of making and through the art of, not the art, but the act of craft. Craft is super important. We focus on art a lot, but there's a process that takes place. And that's why whenever I introduce myself, I say I am, you know, a maker. And to make is very important. And that's something that I hope I can continue to do. And if somebody sees something that I've made as artful, what does that mean? So for me, art isn't something that is separate, or it's like a drawer that you know, that you put your art in. For me, I think if I could say, living my life and engaging with others in a way where it is rich with meaning, then my life has become full of that kind of word that you would say is art. Because for me, I believe that art is a process. And a lot of times, and this is the challenge that we're having, is that art has become so capitalized and commercialized that you have to be successful in selling your art in order for you to be recognized as someone who is successful in that field. And I do not equate that, not just in art, but in so many other fields, because there's so many artists who are creating things that resonate or that have meaning that we will never know or we will never see. And it's not just because of social media. So for me, I don't consider what I do art. I consider this practice. This is how I do my daily practice. And so doing the things that we do become rituals or practices that we do that allow us to navigate our way or to find solutions or not, but to explore the process. And that to me is much more important than how I define it. So when people call me an artist, it's not like I'm trying to shy away from it, but I also want to make sure that we have really good recognition for how important and how incredibly valuable towards culture and civilization and expression, how important craft is for me, first and foremost. Art, it becomes a result, because there are lots of things that craft makers made a long time ago. That craftsman wasn't thinking that it's going to be a piece of art and that it's going to be in a museum or it's going to be sold at an auction or. That gentleman who was creating, for example, some of the pieces on the table are antiques that my parents collected, the brass, which are very hard to find. That gentleman or that gentlewoman who was making those pieces wasn't saying, oh, I'm here to make a piece of art. That person was present. They were focusing on their craft. They were focusing on their skill. They were focusing on the act of making, and that somebody would buy that piece from a functional and an aesthetic standpoint took place. So that's something really important that I think is a very important part of our awareness and our conversation. The act of making and the practice of learning is continuous. And that to me is really important, because people look at art as some kind of a way to save, to be a savior to something. So like lots of rich people and politicians say art will save us. No, it's people, and people can do that. Art is a trigger. Art is a point to do things. But a lot of times, what you make and the process is the art. So it's the practice and the action of it, not necessarily the end result. There are lots of things that people will never see, but your daily practice is what becomes that.
Glass fume art, a delicate and specialized craft, traces its origins to ancient times, when glass-making techniques were first developed. Glass as a medium has been used for centuries, with evidence of glass production dating back to the Mesopotamians and Egyptians around 2000 BCE. However, the concept of using fumes and vapors to color or modify glass came much later. Early glassmakers experimented with adding different elements like metals to molten glass, creating vibrant colors and textures. In the Middle Ages, the Venetian island of Murano became a hub for glass artistry, where new techniques like glass blowing and colored glass production flourished. Though fuming was not yet formalized, these early glassmakers set the foundation for future developments in manipulating glass with heat, color, and other chemical processes. As time progressed, alchemists and artisans began exploring the reactions between glass and metallic fumes, giving birth to early versions of glass fume art. By the Renaissance, glassmakers were experimenting with silver and gold fuming, adding lustrous hues to glassware. This method of infusing metals into glass surfaces became a highly prized technique, with artists producing intricate, colorful designs that symbolized wealth and status. The technique was slowly refined, paving the way for the modern craft of glass fume art, which would develop further with technological advancements in glass working tools. In the present day, glass fume art has evolved into a highly specialized and sought-after craft. Modern artists like Lubna Abbas utilize advanced glass working techniques to manipulate glass with precision. Glass fume art now often involves the use of a torch, where artists apply vaporized metals such as silver and gold onto hot glass to create stunning visual effects. This process allows for the creation of intricate designs with swirling colors and metallic finishes that catch light in unique ways. Technological advances have significantly improved the tools available to glass fume artists, making it easier to control the temperature and composition of the glass, allowing for more detailed and complex pieces. Contemporary artists have taken inspiration from both ancient methods and modern science to push the boundaries of what is possible with glass. Artists today use fuming not only for decorative glassware, but also in sculptures, jewelry, and other intricate art forms. Looking toward the future, glass fume art is expected to continue evolving with further innovations in materials and techniques. As technology progresses, we may see the introduction of new metallic compounds, more sustainable methods, and even digital tools that could assist in designing and creating glass art. Additionally, 3D printing technology may begin to intersect with glass art, opening up possibilities for complex forms that are currently difficult to achieve by hand. As artists experiment with combining glass fume techniques with modern technology, the craft will likely expand into new realms of creativity while continuing to honor its rich history.
Lots of people ask, what is it about glassmaking? What is glassmaking, or what we call flame working? And it's really interesting because people are very surprised, first of all, to know I also studied art history. And so it's very interesting because lots of people don't realize the importance of this craft. And what's very interesting, particularly with bead making and flame working, and they also call it lamp working, is that it was discovered in Mesopotamia, which is what we would call former or ancient Iraq. So the Mesopotamians did something where they used a fanus or a lantern, and they would create a hose and they would pump in oxygen to make the flame hotter. And to this day, if you go to India and many other countries, they still use these same traditional methods. So they were able to manufacture glass. They probably saw like lava cooling or lightning hitting the silica and the sand. And so they started actually making the raw material. And so they started creating bead making, and creating shapes of jewelry is one of the most ancient forms of expression. And imagine that we're still doing it thousands of years later. So you melt the glass with the rods. So these are the rods, okay? And you melt the glass and you wrap it around a matrix or a base, which is called a mandrel. And this is one way of working with glass. But glass today is probably one of the most important discoveries, industrial discoveries for humanity that we're still using today, and they're used functionally, aesthetically. And so beads became a form of trade. The Arabs were first and foremost in trading. And it started in Mesopotamia, went to North Africa and the Far East, kind of in a simultaneous fashion, and then moved to Europe. And so it's a craft, but it also involves its chemistry, its physics, its art, and it's all of those disciplines fused in a very dynamic fashion, because you'll be able to see what's happening as it's happening. So it's a very responsive material. And I started learning how to make beads in 2003. And I did it off and on, and I'm still mesmerized. I'm still fascinated. I still want to go back to the torch and try something. Or when I see some other of my colleagues or artists do it, it's endless. And what's really amazing about glass beads is that you can put it in your pocket, or you can put it on a string, and you can transport it and move it. So the glass beads has been instrumental in the history of commerce and trade and cultural identity across the globe. So when a lot of people ask us, like, what is it that you use in order to do this? So let's talk about the equipment first. So the type of equipment we use is we're using our flame working torch, and this is a low pressure torch, and it uses oxygen and propane. And so this is my best friend, and we basically use it, and it's called a surface mix torch. And we then use the glass rods, and the glass rods are made by manufacturers from all over the world, and these glass rods are used to create the beads. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that you can actually create your own type of designs and components, which we'll be showing you hopefully later. With that, there's another type of glass which is called frit, and the frit is crushed glass, and you also use that. We then have to, of course, use, this is the famous saying, flame on, glasses on, so we use safety glasses. These safety glasses also allow you to see the flame more clearly, and for you to be able to protect your retina and your eyes as you're working. Really, you don't need a lot of tools, because one of the main tools is you. after the torch, the main tool is you. What I mean by that? I mean, it's your hands, it's rotation, it's gravity, and it's using the law of physics to allow the glass to work and move in the way that you want it. And then you don't need a lot of tools after that, but here are some of the tools that I use a lot. So I've got my tweezers, and we use the tweezers to shape and to pull. These are glass shears, and you can also cut the glass and shape the glass with this as well. You can use, this is like an X-Acto razor. So there are lots of things that I could use from the kitchen, or there are dental tools that we use as well. So there's a lot of things that you can use. Sculpting tools are also, I'm using a masher, and this is an army knife that I've had for too long. I use this as well. And of course, in my case, I need my prescription glasses. For people who are in the crafts, it's very important. And again, there's so many craftsmen in Kuwait that are located all over, especially in the Shueikh area, that are the hidden treasures. So crafts is part of our culture and part of our cultural literacy. And I think it's really important because a lot of people, when we say hiwaya or hobby, we say, oh, that's something that you do like on your free time, right? But for many people, the crafts are their livelihood. And a lot of people think that when people do hobbies or when they do crafts, that they can afford to do it, or that like they don't pay rent and they don't have families to feed, and we don't have, financial obligations, because we look at the creative and the arts. Sometimes within that, let's say that pair of glasses, I think it's really, really important for us to recognize that that the craftsmen and craftwomen have a very important role to play in design and in production, and that a lot of the craftsmen that we have in Kuwait who have, they don't have to be Kuwaiti, but they are in Kuwait, or they are people who are making, we're losing them. And it's very important for us to understand that we really need to nurture and give people spaces, which is what we're doing here today, and to make it accessible for people to start, but for people to continue and to be able to sustain it. And so that's something that I think is really important, is that we need to appreciate the value of the time that people who make, what their time is, because that's time from our lives. That's time from their lives. And we need to look at it in a way where it's not just a commodity. It's time. And time is something that you can't take back. And so when people undervalue the importance of craftsmanship and what it translates into and what it means, it is actually taking away from the value of our cultural economy and of economies. So homemakers and people who make and craftsmen, we need to really, really understand how important they are to the overall context of our societies and civilization moving forward.